This is Hot Science with the week's top stories of uh, science, technology, and medicine. I'm your host, Richard Clark. Welcome. And let me uh, give you a rundown on the week's stories. The top two stories are AI stories. This is a big time for AI, so I think it's appropriate. The first is that Microsoft is beating Google at its own game, at least for now. And the next story is a job story saying these jobs are most likely to be replaced by chatbots like ChatGPT. And in environmental, UK scientists discover a method to reduce steelmaking CO2 emissions by almost 90%. And this is something that can be retrofitted into existing steel mills. It doesn't require the investment in a new steel mill to use the technology. And in space, the story is of the kind of current ventures in space that are international involving different companies for the mission. And this is a UAE lunar rover, which is going to test the first artificial intelligence on the moon with Canada. And of course, they're using a SpaceX launch. So this is kind of the current generation of exploration of space. And in biology and genetics, a gene editing company hopes to bring the dodo back to life. It became extinct in the 1700s. And then our human story is of a Nigerian artist who is using AI to reimagine life for the elderly. And he was inspired by his mother, as often is the case with us young boys. And then finally, in health and medicine, quote, it was all for nothing, end quote. The Chinese count of Xi's snap decision to let COVID rip. So let us get on with the stories. And so first, Microsoft beating Google at its own game. And Microsoft appears now to be on the cusp of being something it hasn't been in a long time, that is, being a cutting edge technology company. Microsoft might be now an nimble, innovative company that is able to beat Google in artificial intelligence. And that is thanks to OpenAI and Microsoft's substantial investment in that company. And OpenAI is the hottest AI company at the moment. And they're good friends with Microsoft. Microsoft is investing $10 billion into OpenAI this year, and that is on top of the $3 billion that it's already given OpenAI since 2019. And Microsoft is said to be adding ChatGPT to its Bing search engine. And this will make Bing, which is presently a little used search engine, to where it is powerful in the marketplace and can be a real competitor for Google search. Now,
Richard, you've been very successful in using Dolly and Chat GPT.
Yes, yes. In fact, this morning I got an email from Bob, who said he's working on a sermon for UU and he can't figure out how to get Chat GPT working. And can I get Chat GP to write him some sermon drafts? And I was able to send him back a 1,000-word draft of a sermon in less than 5 minutes.
Richard, I would prefer, I know there's a time conflict, but I would prefer Wednesday that you were there to go into the humanist impact.
Right. I would like
AI
that.
that's currently available.
Yeah, I would like that too. It's just I have this other thing that I've been doing regularly for years, and it's at the heart of my main activity now, which is this spiritual teaching. And this is also the thing that I've been focusing on in the last few weeks. And I have gotten my YouTube channel has increased from 1,500 visits a month to 6,000 visits a month. So,
is there any joy in that, Richard?
I have lots of joy in it. And one of the things that gives me joy is I've learned at this time in our life, the way to make myself the most happy is to share and give away whatever I have and know. That's what I try to do in these sessions.
And we enjoy.
That's right.
We enjoy the topics you select.
Well, it's a labor of love on my part. I've been interested in this stuff since I was about 10 years old and spent my career in the middle of it in Silicon Valley. So anyway, back to the story. ChatGPT is potentially a game changer for Microsoft, and they're saying they're not going to repeat the same mistakes on missing out on social media and mobile that they did 20 years ago. They gave that to Google and the like. And so Microsoft is clearly being aggressive on the AI front, and they're not going to be left behind. I think evidence of that is the $13 billion they put in the pot. And so,
have we seen any Microsoft applications coming out?
they say it'll
coming.
It's coming. They have said they've started to build it into some of their Microsoft 365 applications also, and I think that is coming quickly.
And they say they're going to combine it with Bing somehow, right, and make it try to make Bing the preferred search engine instead of Google.
Right, and it looks like they will do it. They used to have a "I'm getting lucky" thing on the search engine, and it will be an option in the search engine instead of the conventional answer. Google.
Andrew, you're absolutely right. Google is in a panic.
Right.
They get $13 billion from Google search a year. And they see that as going away with AI. And Bing, Microsoft putting in $13 billion into OpenAI suggests that Microsoft Bing could indeed become more useful than Google.
But
I've always thought of Dr. Google, but maybe I think of Dr. Bing.
right. Anyway, Google is not laying down. You know, Google has been spending enormous amounts of money on AI for a number of years. And the Chat GPT is developed on top of the transformer technology that was developed by Google. The GPT part of Chat GPT's name stands for Generative Prediction Transformer. So it's built on Google ideas. And so Google, though it's been doing all this development, has held back, saying it wants to make sure that the products are responsible and safe before unleashing it. I think the other reason that Google could be holding back is like Microsoft 20 years ago. Google has all of these lawsuits and government actions against it. And I think all that government action against Google, both in the US and in Europe and in other places internationally, have made Google a little more conservative. And so at this point, Microsoft is willing to take the risk to get their stuff out to the market first. And so far, that risk seems like a real good risk. Chat GPT is the fastest growing consumer internet application ever. And in the first 2 months, it's racked up 100 million users.
No, generally partially true that we have available now probably will be supplanted by others.
Oh, yes, absolutely. This is still the beginning. We're still in the infancy of this area of technology.
But
Now,
Richard, you have used Chat GPT 3, not 4, but GPT 3 for your applications, and it's worked brilliantly.
yes, but I've really only dug into it in the last month.
Have you had to wait in line to use it? Because I've heard that some people have tried to get it and had to wait.
Yes.
What's a typical wait?
It's been 20 minutes or 3 days.
Is that 20 minutes before it even first responds, or 20 minutes after?
It responds quickly and says, we're in trouble.
But then will it accept your question and go away with it and come back in 20 minutes?
It has a response mode where it basically says, we're stuck, come back later.
Oh.
But GPT has a subscription base where you get better service.
Right. That it's like $25 a month or $50 a month. Since I live on Social Security, my preferred systems are the free ones. So I'm willing to wait. And anyway, it's been very good. One of the things I've used it for, I've used it to help me with my YouTube videos. One of the things that happens in YouTube is people search for the videos and they search on keywords. And I've used it to give me a list of keywords, and it will give me lists that it thinks are ranked in the priority sequence with Google's viewers. And so it's amazing stuff. I also have done a couple of promotion videos for 2 different YouTube channels. And I started with a script that Chat GPT wrote for exactly that purpose. I had to edit them some, but it's a great way to start when you already have a draft of it under your fingertips ready to work on.
Now, you don't find that subscription to Chat GPT would add a lot of value?
If I was using it in my work in something that was generating money, then the subscription is cheap. Since I'm doing it to see if I can give more away, then the cost dimensions are different. Anyway, the last comment I'm going to make there is a comment that was made by Derek Lieben, a professor at Carnegie Mellon's Business School. He says this is a brilliant move from Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. This is something that is definitely going to position Microsoft very well. And so, any more comments?
I've been wondering when Microsoft will offer in their Bing browser AI.
I've heard it will be this month or next month. It's soon. You know, the big and so we're going to see it fast, and it may be that on the same time frame that we see Google's version of it showing up too. I've been reading in the last few days multiple articles about Google's doing stuff to get ready to go, and they're going to build it into Chrome as well.
Yeah, Google is absolutely endangered. And
Yes,
has all hands on deck to develop the public access to artificial intelligence.
yep.
I went and read about Google's chatbot technology, Lameda, I think they call it, and one of their engineers, who has since been fired apparently, is claiming that Lameda has become sediment. So
And
it was an interesting read.
And interestingly enough, the AI engine that he was writing about is now the old version, and there's a newer version at Google that they have not yet released and made public. So what he was saying is sentient was the old model.
It may be even more sediment now.
And GPT-4, because we're running GPT-3.
Yes, 3.5 we're running now. Right.
GPT-4 promises much greater utility.
Right. Now, one of the things I've found about GPT presently is already there has risen an aftermarket that is pretty substantial. One of them is using their API and building applications around it, where you have different ways to ask questions, and they're formatting the question to get the best response. Another way is the key to GPT-3 responses is the prompt that you give. And so there are applications, for example, that are collections of the best prompts that different people have developed. And so, for example, the web page keyword generator is a prompt that was developed by the community.
And Richard, you have endeavored to use ChatGPT to develop the keywords for your stuff.
Yes. And I'm doing a bunch of changes at once, so I don't know what is the relative impact of my longer keyword lists. But as I say, I know I have quadrupled my traffic somehow.
Yeah, there's a huge potential for manipulation of the user here.
Sure.
Just like Facebook tailors the news it gives you to your interests, this Bing AI could adjust your searches to suit its objectives.
Right. And I think it will not be long before this technology is built in to the advertising engines that are connected to social media, and that I believe they will use this technology to create personalized ads just for you at the time you click on it.
As a consumer, you have to feel vulnerable to
Yep.
this.
If I had any money to spend, I would be.
Norman, you're shaking your head. Do you not feel vulnerable?
No, I think we are now, but increasingly we'll get more targeted advertisements.
So we're going to see, again, this is just the beginning. We're in a new generation. Now, let me get to the...
But Richard, we're not in a new generation. We're in months of dramatic change.
Yes.
Months.
Yes.
Not years.
And you're imagining a step change in the way things are done.
Andrew, that's the best way to express the thought. Yes.
Now, and the next article was about some of this. This is about jobs that are most likely to be replaced by chat boxes like GPT. And it's clear that some workers will be displaced, and at the same time, there'll be entirely new activities and potential opportunities for employment that will emerge. Again, this is what happens in these times of extreme change. And here are what the experts say about the kind of workplace jobs that are going to be different. One of the ones on the top of the list is computer programming. And ChatGPT can write computer code and program applications and software, and it operates already at kind of an intermediate level equivalent to a programmer with about a year's experience, which is not trivial. And this could mean that performing basic programming work that's currently done by humans, ChatGPT can do it, at least the basic stuff and the easy stuff. The hard stuff you still have to have humans for. And because of this, we will need fewer programmers. It could take away jobs, but it also helps those who program now to find mistakes in their code and to write code more effectively. So it's going to replace beginning programmers and be a productivity tool for more advanced programmers. One of the things I wonder about several different areas is if you eliminate the low-level jobs, how do people get skillful enough to operate at the level of the high-level jobs? Because the way programmers become expert is by writing a bunch of code and making a bunch of mistakes and figuring out how to fix them. And if Chat GPT or these kind of engines are doing that, how are they going to learn and how are they going to get good? We'll see.
Richard, as you said before, it's how you input your query into Chat GPT.
Right. Just like I thought 20 years ago that there would be a professional opportunity for somebody who could write good Google queries.
And you know, one of the things they talk about is this increased attention to diversity rather than academic qualifications in university acceptance has resulted in graduates who are less competent than they may have formerly been. And they talk about Stanford University now puts more emphasis on the wannabe professors' diversity descriptions than they do on their academic or scientific achievement. And so this combination, Richard, of the disappearing middle class of training opportunities and the disappearing excellence of competence suggests that we may have unforeseen consequences or unintended consequences.
Well, that's one of the rules of technology.
Andrew, you're absolutely right. People who can manipulate the tools that are now available will outdistance those who can't.
Okay, back on the jobs that are likely to be replaced, one of the areas where these chat engines will work is to deal with email and email issues. So it's easy to imagine doing things like scheduling emails to set up meetings, giving it to an engine like chat saying, I want to have a meeting next Wednesday with Bob and Charlie and Rhonda and Evelyn, negotiate a time and let me know. Another area is in mid-level writing. And, that's the kind of writing that I would consider I do. I'm still not an expert writer, but I can operate well and, do work that is yeoman-like. But I know there are wonderful writers that I'll never get there. And so some of the mid-level writing white-collar jobs can be handled by AI. Some that are already identified is like writing human research letters, job applications and rejections and stuff like this, advertising copy, press releases, many of those are formatted, particularly press releases. Writing ad copy, I would still want to have a person involved because I've known more clever people who can make ad copy sing. But so there's no question that software will make this kind of writing cheaper and then will probably devalue the human labor. And another area, and a big area, is legal functions. And so ChatGPT's abilities translate well into the legal profession. And, it's already recently passed a law school exam and earned a passing grade in a class after writing essays on a number of legal topics ranging from constitutional law to taxation and torts. And for most lawyers in the US, I don't know around the world, but there is way too much work to get it done. So the lawyers make a choice about what they're going to work on and what they're not going to work on. Common legal forms and documents things like lease agreements and wills and non-disclosure agreements are fairly standard and can be drafted by an advanced chat box. And there are parts of legal documents that humans need to adapt to a particular situation, but most of it is boilerplate. So there's no reason why you can't just give it the specifics that need to be changed for this kind of legal document and have it generate the whole thing. And there aren't enough lawyers around to do all the corporate legal work now. And there's a lot of it that is not creative work and where it can be replaced. What's going to happen, though, is this is not going to reduce the number of lawyers. These are going to be tools that are used so the lawyers and law firms can handle more cases. And in the future of law, there will be some attorneys who don't adapt to this new way of working. They're the ones whose job placement is going to be kind of touch and go. There seems to be a dividing line for the future in law around folks who don't want to change and people who realize they have to. So this is just, I think, an early review of some of the impacts on jobs that come from ChatGPT. And I would point out these are not low-level workman jobs. These are jobs that are presently being done by skills, kind of knowledge workers.
But you know, what it sounds like is more lawyers, more regulation, more reading of and interpreting of rules, and less ethics and less honesty and less trust in other people. And all these things seem to encourage loophole looking and that sort of thing, rather than encourage trust and responsibility. So is this good or bad?
We'll find out later. Come back in 100 years.
I guess so.
But it is not in 100 years. In a year, we'll see what is forthcoming.
Right.
And at our age, the years go by so quickly, it'll be tomorrow and we'll know.
So again, this certainly, as the two of you were saying, the changes that are going to happen here are going to be monumental and fast.
Fast is a key word.
Now, this part of this has been things that I have wondered about for some time, which is, you know, in times like this of these enormous changes, if you're going to send a kid to college, what are you going to have them study? You know, because it seems like if you have them study any of the technical areas or stuff like this, you can guarantee by the time they have their degree, everything they know will be obsolete. So I kind of wonder if this means for the future, the good old liberal arts education where you teach them how to read and write and think, and don't teach them any specific subject, might be the kind of tool we need, except now you need to teach them how to read and write and make a good prompt for ChatGPT.
Well, yeah, and we learned two things in university. One was critical thinking, The other was how to access information, how to go to the guide to periodic literature and so forth to access information. And that is something that doesn't require university education anymore.
Right, right. It requires being able to write a good query, a good question for Google. And a question that gives you specific information and not just a million pieces of general stuff.
And now the emphasis in universities is more on gender studies and diversity studies. So maybe that'll be what everybody comes away with.
Yeah, important, but the ability to access information now is ever more critical.
Right.
And you wonder, where is the competence going to come from that's necessary to run this complex techno society?
Well, as somebody who has been involved in learning about this stuff, I don't find these tools have reduced the amount of learning I'm doing. It's just changed the nature of it.
No, Richard, it has increased your tools
Right.
dramatically.
Right. So for me, I see these tools are things that give me more leverage and more ability than I had before. And I appreciate the heck out of it. As I say, for a writing assistant, it's the best writing assistant I ever had. And like what you found out, or what your daughter found out, Andrew, when you ask it to write something for you, you don't have to check the spelling and the punctuation. I think I could even ask it to proofread my stuff and correct all of that. I haven't tried that yet. I don't want to put Carol out of a job. She would be mad.
Yeah, and maybe editing. AI can take over editing of.
And
work.
certainly if there's a part of it, it can do just fine. And editing and summarizing and doing things like this that are a part of the process.
Yeah, and a lot of editing as well as spelling and punctuation is ambiguity resolution and that
Right.
sort of thing.
Right. Well, the editor I want is someone who can do think check. I don't care as much about spell check. Okay, here we are. There's Chad again. And let me go on to the next story. The UK scientists have discovered a method to reduce steelmaking CO2 emissions by 90%. And this is an innovative method for existing furnaces that could reduce steelmaking CO2s very dramatically. And in the iron and steel industry are a major cause of greenhouse gases, accounting for 9% of global emissions. And that's because it's inherently a carbon intensive process as usually done. And in a blast furnace, it takes coke, which is a form of coal, to produce metallic iron from ore, and this releases large quantities of CO2. And this technology uses the CO2 that is released in this process using a thermochemical society where the CO2 is turned into a useful part of the reaction, forming a nearly perfect carbon closed loop. And this dramatically reduces emissions and the amount of coke needed, and lowers steelmaking's emissions by up to 88%. And presently the way they're working on decarbonizing steel is by phasing out existing plants and phasing in electric arc furnaces powered by renewables. And these electric arc plants can cost over $1 billion to build. So that's a pretty steep change. And this system they're proposing can be retrofitted to existing plants, which reduces the risk of stranded assets and provides a substantial reduction in CO2. And because you don't need as much coke, it reduces the cost, and it reduces the cost basically as soon as you start to use it. So the cost savings are seen immediately. So to me, this is the most promising thing that I've heard on the steel front, and that's a substantial part of the industrial CO2 emissions.
And steel has always been based on the energy source. In Europe, the steel production was based on coal.
Mm-hmm.
In the North Atlantic and the Baltic states, and the wind generation offers a new steel producing area, not based on coal, but based on local generation by the wind turbines and so forth in the North Sea. Tremendous change.
But you still have to throw away your steel plant and build a new arc plant. So it's not a trivial change.
The article included a link that you could download or look at a PDF file that had a more complete explanation of the process. And it's a really good explanation of conventional iron smelting and the different problems with substitution of coke and whatever. But the basic thing with iron smelting is iron ore is iron oxide, and you want to remove the oxygen. And in the old days, they would put coke in, and the carbon is burned in the coke to remove the oxygen and release CO2. So they've got a different system now to remove the oxygen, and it uses carbon, but the carbon can be recycled. But what wasn't clear to me was, well, where does the energy come from? Because iron ore has been oxidized and released a lot of energy, and you have to put a lot of energy in to reverse that reaction and remove the oxygen. And in reading the PDF, I didn't see where the energy was coming from to reverse this reaction. But
well, that's exactly why some of these manufacturing activities will go to locations where renewables are more available. And we'll see that, say, especially in Australia, especially in Northern Europe, where they're not dependent on fossil fuels at all.
Now, also, I have read about the new steel processing plants that use electricity instead of carbon. Is they're able then to end up making a higher quality of steel that has a longer life and is stronger. So there also are other advantages in these electric arc furnaces that you can change the process and make a better product. But
just like data centers now are located near sources of renewable energy. be it hydro or whatever, so too will steel making be located closer to energy resources.
The problem is though, steel making and in these industrial processes have to run 24 hours a day. So they
Right.
need uninterruptible energy supplies. And that currently doesn't come from wind or solar. And so you either need some method of storing energy for the interruptions in the renewable energy.
But the North Sea does have continuous wind.
Okay,
And that's,
well,
yeah,
if,
that is, so they have the advantage of not having to store the energy.
yeah, I think,
Anyway, it's a good discussion, but we need to keep moving on. So, the UAE is going to be making a deal with Canada and with SpaceX, and they're going to be launching the first AI rover on the moon. I have a picture of it, I hope. And that's not it, but we're getting close to it. There we are. There is the rover, and it'll have Canadian artificial intelligence, and of course, using SpaceX to get it there. And if this works, this is going to be big for NASA's moon push. What they're trying to use this for is to use the AI and be able to have it mark objects that it wants to look at and highlight those, and then be able to use that as a basis for figuring out where to go next and when to explore next. And this is the first big AI mission that is beyond low Earth orbit, and NASA is really hopeful about this, because if they are able to do this, then you're not going to need as many humans interpreting the data. This slows the whole process down when you have to have humans involved in it. This mission, though, because the equipment can't stand the cold temperatures of the lunar night, the mission is only going to run for one lunar day. That's 14 Earth days to test it out, and then it'll freeze itself to death overnight. And what they hope is that with this technology, future missions will take the humans out of the loop once the engineers are confident enough about its capability. And also on places like the moon, where you have limited communication ability, AI can save a lot of limited bandwidth, because it would only need to share the data, images, and videos that it thinks the scientists need, instead of uploading all the videos for the analysis. So it can save that way also. And so they say we see an enormous opportunity for deploying AI on the edge of space. So this AI is getting around.
you know what it must be though? AI requires a huge amount of data to access for the AI to look at. So maybe what they're doing here is like Tesla did with their self-driving software. They used AI offline to examine the huge amount of data and develop the algorithms that would work for self-driving. And then those much more compact algorithms are loaded into the actual vehicle and make the decisions needed at
Well,
the time.
certainly, a lunar rover needs a much more defined subset of data.
So really, the bulk of the AI would have been done here on Earth
Oh,
with
of
the
course,
available
of course,
data, and then the algorithms scrambled into this
right, right.
local thing. The other thing that's worth mentioning is this UAE thing. It's not entirely theirs. It's piggybacking in a Japanese
Right.
rover
Yes,
that is being launched by SpaceX.
right.
But the Japanese have been more interested in exploring the asteroids for rare earth metals.
Yeah, exploitable money-making type things.
Yep, yep.
That isn't, that to date is not the moon, but asteroids or whatever the Japanese have been exploring.
Okay, now moving on to biology, a gene editing company hopes to bring the dodo back to life. And the dodo was last seen in the 17th century. And gene editing techniques exist now that where scientists believe they'll be able to mine the dodo genome that they have collected from specimens in museums and stuff, and they'll be able to mine it for the key traits that they think they can then reassemble within the body of a living relative. Dodos are most closely related to the pigeons. So what they would end up doing is take a pigeon egg and use the genetic modification techniques on the pigeon egg, so that it would hatch a dodo or a dodo-like creature instead of a pigeon. And it's what they believe is these creatures would be fertile and they would pass their genes on through their progeny. And one of the things that they're talking about doing is when they do this, releasing them back into Mauritania, where they were to begin with. And the company that's doing this is Colossal Biosciences. It's a gene editing company, and it's already embarked on other projects, one of which is to bring back the woolly mammoth. They would do that by editing the reproductive system in elephants to get them to turn out mammoth babies. And this would be the first time they use the genetic editing technique on a bird. And this is a lot easier, they think, than using it on an animal, because you just have to do it to the bird. And if you're editing the genetic system of an elephant, the elephant might not like it. So anyway, it's interesting, and nobody has yet managed to use gene editing for birds in this way. And we'll see how this works out. There is, of course, an enormous argument going on about the ethics of doing this, and people saying, why are you spending all this money to bring back a useless bird? You should use it to save humanity. But this is still science doing their science stuff.
Yeah, it's not Mauritania they're going to let the dodos loose on. It's Mauritius, that island
Okay.
off the coast of Africa.
Okay.
But you got to think there must be some money in this somewhere for them to throw $150 million at it.
Well, they've gotten that from external funders.
Yeah, so those funders aren't just donating this money out of altruism. It's they expect some spin-off benefit and
Right,
profit.
right. Well, if you can learn, as you can learn to do all of these things genetically, I'm sure that we will see spin-offs that we can't imagine.
Well, it'll be like that chicken with the three legs, for people that have guests and everybody wants a drumstick, you know.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Nothing but drumsticks. Okay, let me continue. And this is yet another AI story. I'm sorry, I keep giving you these AI stories. That's what's in the news now. But this is a different one where a Nigerian artist is using AI to reimagine life for African elderly people by showing near real life pictures and videos about them doing things like walking down the fashion ramp and being on a beach. Here I have some pictures for you of this. And here is an African man coming down a runway. His gray hair shows, so we know he's an elder. And look at those cool clothes he's wearing. And there is this African woman also coming down the runway, dressed to the nines in native clothes. Here's another African man with a beard, and I think he looks really sharp, you know? And here I brought a video. Let me see if I can get the video up. Too many videos. I can't see it. I can't see it. Here we are. Okay. So I thought this was interesting. Here is an artist using, excuse me, uh, the artist is using AI tools to reinvigorate the lives of old people, imagining them doing things and being places that they could never be in their life. And, I think this is an interesting and creative way to do it. And he's trying to do something that he feels enhances the quality of the life of the elders in his society. And as an elder in this society, I appreciate people who try to do that. Good work.
Yeah, but is it really AI or is it just digital imaging and transferring of some recognized characteristics to different
I think it's still AI because he's got them. They're not still images; they're moving images, and they're not just a matter of posting a face and another moving image, but they're building it from the ground up. But
Now,
you know,
Richard, you've used Dolly to do video, to create video.
mhm. And so I do a lot of video making now, but it's real simple stuff as compared to what these guys are doing. And I don't know how he's doing it, but I can't do that in my video editor. Anyway, and so the final story for today is another story about the Chinese COVID situation. And after 3 years of lockdown, China was not prepared for its abrupt freedom. And now, with deaths maybe approaching 1 million people, public anger is growing. And in 2022, by the end of the year, zero COVID was gone. And people, when that happened, first felt relieved that lockdowns were over. But for many of them, the feelings turned soon to anger as it became clear that China's government had opened up the country knowing it wasn't ready. It felt like it was all for nothing, is a kind of quote that you hear now. And when this happened, critical cases were registered in the hospital every day, 10,000 critical cases a day. Morgues were overwhelmed. Pharmacies reported shortages. And online, and in the street, people spoke of almost everyone they knew having caught COVID and of elderly relatives dying. And global health experts said that there are plenty of lessons that it could have heeded, mainly making sure that vaccinations and health resources were high and mobilized before you make this drastic change. But that's not what China did. China just threw the gates open, and so cases started spreading. There weren't enough doctors, nurses, intensive care beds, medications, antiviral drugs. Vaccination rates were still inadequate. And the first 55,000 deaths that were reported by the Chinese government in this way were at an average age of almost 80. Like Norman has been saying, I did well of getting rid of the excess elderly population. And Chinese abrupt U-turn was seen by many as a rash one-man decision. And within 24 hours, they saw a total turnaround of the policy. And when the leader is acting on a whim, there is no predictability and no certainty. And it's hard to know what the death count is. The official death count is about 75,000, and the unofficial death count is 1 million. And there's a lack of transparency and problems getting COVID-related death data and collection, et cetera. So it's hard to know. And one quote from a Chinese woman living abroad said, quote, "I'm astonished that the 3 years of COVID haven't been used for a more humane exit strategy." So it sounds like there are people in China who are very much unhappy about it. If they had a democratic government, then that degree of unhappiness would probably mean something for their rulers. But Xi just got himself put in place for another 5 years, and it doesn't seem like he's worried about the political ramifications. He just wanted to get the economy moving again. So comments?
But it's interesting how the COVID news has changed over the last 3 years. Initially, it was all about the origins of COVID and whether it had come from a Wuhan wet market or a Wuhan lab. Then it was about the effectiveness of the different vaccines. Then it was all about the availability of vaccines and harmful side effects. And then whether the vaccines are being used in the third world. And then now we're into lockdowns and the harmful effects on the economy and human psychology of lockdowns. And I wonder if it's all really useful news, or is it just the media coming up with new noise to attract and deliver an audience to advertisers? It's talking about people getting old and dying, everyone accepts that everyone's going to get old and die from something. And the media almost goes out of their way to cherry pick people who are outraged because their 90-year-old uncle died. Well, I think the media are more at fault than the political decision makers. I see Norman nodding his head. That's good.
No, absolutely. The media distort things terribly. And what she's done, first with the lockdown without a good vaccine, and now taking a measure that will reduce the disproportionate aged population in China. Very interesting.
And we don't even know if it's all true or if we're just getting the media's spin on it that will attract our attention.
Well, the media has been known as a problem. The saying, if it bleeds, it leads, came from the 1800s. So
we have hundreds of people dying every day in the US of opioid overdoses, and a few mass shootings gain attention. No, every day, hundreds of people dying from opioid overdoses, and the news media follows a couple mass shootings.
Well, I think we are at 3 o'clock. This has been going on for an hour 15, and I think we're at the end of the show today. And I thank you all for joining me and for the lively discussion. And we'll see you next week. And keep sciencing, guys.
Yep, thanks again, Richard, for getting us together and getting us talking.
Uh-huh. It's work that is, I think, good for all of us, and certainly it's good for me. So anyway, thanks for joining us. And we'll see you next time.